Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with a pretty long recap for you. I've been prepping this story every day for the last 6 days, but it seems like new details and developments kept coming out, and I wanted to present as complete a picture as I could. Now that Jimmy Kimmel's future has been, at least for now, determined, I wanted to try to cut through some of the noise and give some background on exactly what happened, why I think some of it happened, and my thoughts on the last several days. Late night television, which has already been turbulent in recent weeks, was rocked again last week with the news that Jimmy Kimmel Live was being suspended from airing on ABC. Immediately following the announcement of Kimmel's suspension, many people, including the President of the United States, prematurely announced that Kimmel had been fired, which was not technically accurate. ABC announced last Wednesday that Jimmy Kimmel Live was suspended indefinitely after comments he made during last Monday's opening monologue regarding the man charged with the murder of Charlie Kirk. FCC Chairman Brendan Carr specified exactly which remarks Kimmel made that he found objectionable, so I'm going to present what Kimmel said here purely to provide context for the rest of the story.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Industry reporting said that Kimmel planned to address those remarks on last Wednesday's show, clarifying that he was not saying that the shooter was part of the MAGA movement, but that many were trying to label him as anything other than being part of the MAGA movement. However, following statements from the head of the FCC and several affiliates dropping Kimmel's show, Disney reportedly made the decision to suspend Kimmel, partially to prevent being forced to cancel his show altogether, should his statements on Wednesday make the situation worse. So there's actually a timeline to how all of this unfolded last week. First, on last Wednesday, FCC Chairman Brendan Carr appeared on a podcast hosted by Benny Johnson, a close ally of Charlie Kirk's, who expressed outrage at Kimmel's comments and stated his desire, and the desire of others, for the FCC to take action against Kimmel and ABC based on policies regarding news distortion and government regulations that any entity granted a public broadcast license must serve the public interest. On the podcast, Carr said in part, quote, "There's actions that we can take on licensed broadcasters, and frankly, I think that it's really sort of past time that a lot of these licensed broadcasters themselves push back on Comcast and Disney and say, listen, we're going to preempt, we are not going to run Kimmel anymore until you straighten this out, because we, the licensed broadcaster, are running the possibility of fines or license revocation from the FCC if we continue to run content that ends up being a pattern of news distortion. It's time for them to step up and say that this garbage isn't something that we think serves the needs of our local communities." So what is news distortion exactly? Well, luckily the FCC website has an entire page dedicated to it. It says in part, quote, "The FCC's authority to take action on complaints about the accuracy or bias of news network stations, reporters, or commentators and how they cover or sometimes opt not to cover events is narrow. In weighing the constitutionality of the policy, courts have recognized that the policy makes a crucial distinction between deliberate distortion and mere inaccuracy or difference of opinion. As a result, broadcasters are only subject to enforcement if it can be proven that they have deliberately distorted a factual news report. Expressions of opinion or errors stemming from mistakes are not actionable. The FCC will only investigate claims that include evidence showing that the broadcast news report was deliberately intended to mislead viewers or listeners. Evidence may include testimony from persons who have direct personal knowledge of an intentional falsification of the news, for example, written or oral instructions from station management, outtakes, or evidence of bribery. Without such documented evidence, the FCC generally cannot intervene." Now, it should be noted that the news distortion provision covers broadcast news reports, and as a comedian on a late-night show, it could be debated that those regulations don't cover Kimmel. It's also relevant that the FCC rules on acting in the public interest, at least the ones cited on the podcast, refer to the FCC initially granting a broadcast license. A potential license holder must show that they intend to operate in the public interest to obtain one. Under FCC procedure, the committee can't just revoke a license because they believe that a station isn't following guidelines. Revocation of a broadcast license falls under a different provision requiring the FCC to issue a cease and desist order to anyone who, quote, has failed to operate substantially, end quote, under the terms that the license was granted. That person or entity would then have to appear in front of the FCC within at most 30 days to show cause as to why the license shouldn't be revoked. And by the letter of the law, the burden of proof would be on the FCC to prove why it should be revoked, not on the person or entity to prove why it shouldn't be. In short, at least in my opinion, and I'm no lawyer, moving forward with action against the ABC affiliates would have been a complicated legal process with no clear outcome. Now, today at the Concordia Summit, Brendan Carr denied that he'd ever threatened to pull any broadcast licenses, saying, quote, "What I spoke about last week is that when concerns are raised about news distortion, there's an easy way for parties to address that and work that out. In the main, that takes place between local television stations that are licensed by the FCC and what we call national programmers like Disney. They work that out, and there doesn't need to be any involvement of the FCC. Now, if they don't, there's a way that is not as easy, which is someone can file a complaint at the FCC, and then the FCC, by law, as set up by Congress, has to adjudicate that complaint. And what I've been very clear in the context of the Kimmel episode is the FCC, and myself in particular, have expressed no view on the ultimate merits." While Carr is correct that he did not specifically say that he would pull any broadcast licenses, returning to his original comments, he does specifically say that stations who run programming with a pattern of news distortion, which he clearly labeled Kimmel's remarks as, risk having their licenses suspended, which reads to me as if he was expressing a view on the merits of an FCC complaint and whether it would lead to consequences. But if he truly didn't mean to imply any FCC consequences, then he would ironically be at the center of a public firestorm based on comments that were misinterpreted and taken out of context, which is reportedly the same argument that Kimmel planned to make about his comments last week. Personally, I think he's interpreting his own words very charitably in regards to implied FCC retaliatory action, intentional or unintentional. Now, there are plenty of examples in the past of networks pulling shows off the air based on public outcry due to statements made from someone involved. Roseanne would be one example involving the same network, ABC. There have also been examples of shows being canceled in parallel to a company's involvement with FCC regulators, such as Stephen Colbert's recent cancellation. The network cited internal financial reasons, but also had motivation to cancel the show for business reasons. But what sets this case apart and why there's been so much outcry from both sides of the political spectrum is that ABC's actions to suspend Kimmel seem to come in concert with direct comments and condemnation from the head of the FCC, the government agency which polices broadcast television. This is a level of direct, demonstrable involvement that we haven't seen before. And it should be noted that Brendan Carr's feelings on the FCC taking actions on the basis of a station acting in the public interest seem to have evolved over time. In a 2019 post on what was then Twitter, in response to an FCC statement proposing regulations on advertising for e-cigarettes, Carr wrote, quote, "Should the government censor speech it doesn't like? Of course not. The FCC does not have a roving mandate to police speech in the name of the public interest," end quote. It was this roving mandate that he now appeared to support in his podcast appearance. Shortly after Carr's appearance on the podcast, media company Nexstar announced that it would be pulling Kimmel's show from all of its affiliate networks indefinitely over his comments. Now, if you don't know what an affiliate network is, it's basically the local manager for a national broadcast network. Every metropolitan area in the US has over-the-air broadcasts of ABC, CBS, NBC, etc., but most of those local stations aren't managed by the main network. They are affiliate stations who contract with the broadcast networks to run their programs like Jimmy Kimmel Live and primetime shows, but handle things like local advertising and local news on their own. Generally, the better a broadcast network is doing, the better an affiliate station is doing because they can charge higher local ad rates and draw more viewers. And it is these affiliate stations, not the networks themselves, who hold the broadcast licenses that could potentially be subject to FCC sanctions, including revocation. Nexstar is a massive player in the media sphere that owns several ABC affiliates, including stations in Salt Lake City, Utah, Nashville and Knoxville, Tennessee, Syracuse, New York, New Orleans, and Richmond, Virginia. Nexstar removing Kimmel's show would leave him off the air in several huge markets. If ABC as a network had left Kimmel on the air, it would have been in defiance of one of their largest affiliate networks. According to reporting by The Hollywood Reporter, ABC and Disney only decided to take action after Brendan Carr's comments made the spotlight on Kimmel even bigger. The New York Times reported analysis from a company called Tweetbinder, which tracks trending topics on X, showing that engagement around firing or canceling Kimmel spiked substantially in the hours following Carr's appearance on the podcast. THR wrote in their coverage, quote, almost immediately after FCC Chair Brendan Carr's appearance on Benny Johnson's podcast, multiple ABC station owners held calls with senior Disney leadership expressing their concern with the comments. The execs wanted to know, how is Kimmel going to address the situation on Wednesday night's show? The answer was not satisfactory to management, sources say. Meanwhile, the advertiser calls began to roll in, and then the big affiliate conglomerates, Nexstar and Sinclair, threatened to preempt the show. 66 of the roughly 200 affiliate stations had said that they would not carry the episode. That's when ABC announced it was suspending the program, a Bob Iger and Dana Walden joint decision that was a, quote, last resort. Shortly after ABC announced their decision, another media giant, Sinclair Broadcasting, the largest ABC affiliate group in the country, with stations in Washington, D.C., St. Louis, Missouri, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Portland, Oregon, and Little Rock, Arkansas, right across the river from my hometown, released a statement praising ABC's decision and announced that they would not return Kimmel to their stations until, quote, appropriate steps have been taken to uphold the standards expected of a national broadcast platform, end quote, regardless of what ABC decided about the future of Kimmel's show. Critically, in their statement, Sinclair also established a timeline of events, saying that they had already informed ABC of their decision before the announcement of Kimmel's suspension. The vice chairman of Sinclair also said in the statement, quote, we appreciate FCC Chairman Carr's remarks today, and this incident highlights the critical need for the FCC to take immediate regulatory action to address control held over local broadcasters by the big national networks. Now, it should be noted that Sinclair has openly supported conservative viewpoints and programming in the past, and has often broadcast programs that favorably covered President Trump and his campaigns. This is not the first time that affiliate stations have had a huge role in late-night television. In 2009, after Conan O'Brien took over The Tonight Show, Jay Leno had a nightly show at 10 p.m. Eastern Time every weeknight. The show drew such low ratings that the local affiliates began complaining to NBC, saying that The Leno Show was tanking their local news, which aired directly after his show, leading to decreased revenue. Combined with low ratings for O'Brien's Tonight Show, the affiliate revolt gave NBC the ammunition to reinstall Leno as the host of The Tonight Show, leading to O'Brien's departure from the network. Now, how is it that companies like Sinclair and Nexstar are able to wield so much power? Well, it partially goes back to the Telecommunications Act of 1996, signed into law by Bill Clinton, a Democrat. In addition to updating existing law to include the then emerging Internet and Communications Policy, it also heavily deregulated the industry, meaning that limits that existed on how many stations one company could own were significantly weakened. This allowed corporations like Sinclair to expand their reach, and Nexstar was founded and began buying stations the same year. And there's an angle to this story that we haven't discussed yet, and this is where we move a little bit more into speculation. Nexstar, which pushed the first domino in Kimmel's suspension by ABC, is currently attempting to acquire Tegna, another big affiliate network that owns local stations in cities like Memphis, Tennessee, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, and Austin, Texas, Denver, Colorado, Atlanta, Georgia, and Seattle, Washington, to name a few. This merger would mean that a combined Nexstar-Tegna company would reach households in 75 to 80% of the United States, which is way over the current limit of 39% allowed under FCC regulations. For the merger to move forward, Nexstar would need a waiver to allow them to acquire so many stations, including multiple stations in the same market. And that waiver would have to be granted by the FCC and reviewed by the Justice Department. Sinclair has also been lobbying the FCC to relax this restriction so that they can acquire more stations and expand further. Now, I'm not saying that Brendan Carr told Nexstar to pull Kimmel's show or the mergers off, because I don't think he had to. Nexstar has claimed that their decision wasn't tied to Brendan Carr's comments, but I believe that his statements made it quite clear that if ABC and or its affiliates didn't pull Kimmel from the air, they would be subject to FCC investigation and possible penalties, including license revocation. And if you're a company needing the FCC's approval to complete a multi-billion-dollar merger, I'm guessing you don't want to also be subject to penalties and investigations from the same commission. The reactions to Kimmel's suspension were predictably wildly varied. Many on the right cheered Kimmel's uncertain future, saying that it was a long overdue correction to a media landscape with a liberal bias, and that Kimmel should be punished for his remarks. Many on the left said that this was a chilling violation of the First Amendment and a blatant politicization of government power to silence one of the president's most vocal critics. In the days following the suspension, protests in support of Kimmel were held at local stations around the country and outside Disney's headquarters, with many others either saying they had canceled or urging others to cancel Disney services like Hulu and Disney+. But reaction was not split squarely down ideological lines. Conservative commentators and politicians like Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson also expressed displeasure with the FCC's actions, saying that it could be used in the future against conservative voices by Democratic administrations, and that Brendan Carr's comments were not appropriate and set a bad precedent. After days of uncertainty about Kimmel's future, Disney announced earlier today that Kimmel will return to the airwaves tomorrow night. In a statement, the company said, quote, "Last Wednesday, we made the decision to suspend production on the show to avoid further inflaming a tense situation at an emotional moment for our country. It is a decision we made because we felt some of the comments were ill-timed and thus insensitive. We have spent the last days having thoughtful conversations with Jimmy, and after those conversations, we reached the decision to return the show on Tuesday." Reports from Variety have said that the decision was approved by Bob Iger and Dana Walden, and that the choice to bring Kimmel back was made based on, quote, "what was best for the company and not on external factors." As of recording, Nexstar has not commented on whether they will air Kimmel's show, but Sinclair has stated that they will not. Within the last couple of hours, Sinclair released a statement saying, quote, "Beginning Tuesday night, Sinclair will be preempting Jimmy Kimmel Live across our ABC affiliate stations and replacing it with news programming. Discussions with ABC are ongoing as we evaluate the show's potential return," which is a continuation of their position but seems less definitive than the hard preconditions that they drew last week. Still, as the largest ABC affiliate network, it appears that Kimmel's return will not be broadcast across much of the country, though I'm sure his monologue will still be widely accessible on YouTube and other platforms. So let's get into my thoughts a little bit. I've gone on the record about my discomfort with the increasing direct government influence on the media. I don't think it should be acceptable for either party to use the power of the federal government and its agencies to go after media personalities and news organizations that they don't like in any sort of official capacity. Even if ABC denies it, I don't think that Kimmel would have been suspended if the head of the FCC hadn't threatened sanctions for stations who continued to carry his show. And when you look at the protections afforded under the First Amendment, I think that the more the government gets involved in policing what's said on public airwaves, the worse it gets for freedom of speech in this country. Do people have the right to be angry about what Jimmy Kimmel said, to boycott ABC, or to denounce Kimmel in public, or on podcasts, or on cable news? Absolutely. But should his statements have prompted threats from the FCC against the stations who carry him? Statements that I believe directly led to his show being pulled off the air? No, I don't think they should have. And even if Kimmel hadn't been suspended, I believe that Brendan Carr's remarks were not appropriate in his role as the head of the FCC. I don't believe we should be fighting over which party gets to control the media. I believe we should be united in the idea that no party gets to control the media. There should be room for voices on the left and voices on the right and voices in the middle. And there should be no government oversight as to which of these voices are elevated and which are silenced from the airwaves. And I think that framing this whole situation solely through a political lens misses something just as critical, if not more, which is that this is yet another result of rampant deregulation and conglomeration in the media industry. The bigger these companies get, the more power they wield. And as they seek to grow more and more, they also depend more and more on government approval for that growth, which gives government agencies more leverage over them in order for these mergers and acquisitions to move forward. If this becomes standard operating procedure, it opens the door to the FCC using its regulatory power to pressure media corporations to silence or attempt to silence the voices of whoever's saying something that the government doesn't like. And neither the FCC nor the federal government should be able to wield that kind of power. Maybe you don't like Jimmy Kimmel, and maybe you agree with the FCC's position, and maybe you believe that he should be taken off the air. That's your opinion to have. But remember, you might be fine with it today because it's someone that you don't like, but tomorrow could be a different case entirely. And by then, it may be too late. So those are my thoughts on the whole Jimmy Kimmel situation, at least the developments so far. What do you think? What have your thoughts been over this last week or so? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, stay tuned right here for the latest in movie news, reviews, box office, and more. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.